This is the only city in the world that spans 2 continents. You can simply take a 20-minute ferry ride to cross from Asia to Europe. Yet beneath its modern surface lie underground cities buried dozens of meters deep, where thousands once sought refuge from the fury of war. When exploring Turkey, you aren't just visiting a destination. You are entering a labyrinth of time. Here, magnificent domes cast their shadows beside marble ruins of ancient cities that have stood for thousands of years. Cappadocia. Cappadocia is a magical volcanic wonderland in central Turkey, sculpted by millennia of erosion. The landscape is dominated by thousands of fairy chimneys, towering cone-shaped rock formations rising defiantly from the earth. These massive columns, stretching dozens of meters high, are not mere natural wonders. They are monolithic structures. Here, ancient people didn't build houses. They carved directly into the soft volcanic rock. This was history's most ingenious architectural solution. Volcanic rock provides exceptional insulation, remaining warm in winter and cool under the desert sun. At sunrise, hundreds of hot air balloons drift across the sky, casting dramatic shadows over the rugged valleys, a spectacle that leaves every traveler in awe. Pamukkale. These shimmering terraces are not the result of ice or snow, but the work of millennia of geothermal activity, where calcium-rich water erupts from the earth, cools rapidly, and leaves behind jagged, brilliant basins of limestone. Each pool overflows with a startlingly bright turquoise, creating a jarring, surreal contrast against the blinding, chalky white of the slopes. The chemistry here is relentless. Deep beneath the surface, volcanic gases drive mineral-saturated water upward, forcing calcium carbonate to precipitate the moment it strikes the open air. This is a geological process that never rests. The landscape is in a constant state of flux building, collapsing, and reforming with every passing decade as the crust thickens. It is a live, shifting terrain that dictates its own rules of engagement. Navigating this terrain requires an odd sort of discipline. The wet stone is treacherous and frictionless, while the delicate, crusty surface of the basins is surprisingly fragile. Visitors are channeled into strict, narrow paths, a necessity to prevent the weight of human movement from fracturing a landscape that takes centuries to solidify. There is a sense of predatory beauty in the way the water operates. It is both a sculptor and a jailer, slowly encasing everything it touches in a smooth mineral shell. Pamukkale remains a raw, calcified enigma, a place where the earth has essentially paused its own motion, leaving behind a stark, bleached expanse that feels entirely detached from the natural world surrounding it. Hierapolis. Looming directly above these basins lie the ruins of Hierapolis, an ancient Roman city that quite literally grew into the mineral flow. Walking through the area, you see second-century marble columns submerged in active springs, their foundations being slowly encased and preserved in a limestone cocoon. This was a thriving thermal spa resort, engineered by the Romans to leverage the same geological volatility that shapes the travertine terraces below. The scale of the site reveals a complex urban machine. An immense amphitheater sits carved into the hillside, its stone tiers still echoing the layout of a city designed around water and health. Engineering here wasn't merely about aesthetics. It was about managing the relentless mineral buildup. Aqueducts and drainage channels were constantly redesigned to prevent the calcified sludge from choking the city's infrastructure. Today, the ruins exist in a state of suspended animation. Unlike cities reclaimed by jungle or desert, Hierapolis is being swallowed by the very earth that gave it life. The constant slow drip of lime-heavy water acts as both a tomb and a preservative, sealing the Roman street grid beneath a hardening white shell, ensuring that the legacy of this spa empire remains locked in a permanent, calcified drift. Ölüdeniz. Known as the Blue Lagoon, Ölüdeniz sits at the meeting point of the Mediterranean and the Aegean, where the mountains descend in a sheer jagged wall into the sea. The water here is unnervingly clear, a result of the extreme depth of the surrounding shelf and a constant subterranean spring that flushes the basin, preventing the stagnation that usually plagues enclosed coastal waters. The geography is a study in vertical tension. Behind the beach, the Babadag mountain rises nearly 2,000 meters, creating a launch point for paragliders who spend their days circling the bay like hawks. From above, the scale of the lagoon reveals its defensive nature. It is a sheltered natural harbor that has sat ignored by major history, existing instead as a secluded pocket of geological freakishness. The sand is not sand at all, but a dense collection of white pebbles bleached by the relentless sun and kept pristine by the circular current that traps debris out in the deeper channel. There is no chaos in the water. The lagoon functions as a sound-dampening chamber, cutting off the wind and the surf of the outer coast, leaving a vacuum of stillness that feels distinct from the rest of the Turkish shoreline. It is a place defined by its edges, the sharp line where the deep blue of the open ocean meets the vibrant electric teal of the shallows. Ölüdeniz exists as a detached, self-sustaining microclimate, a turquoise void in the rugged landscape where the sea seems to have stopped moving, entirely creating a sanctuary that feels less like a beach and more like a suspended geological event. Mount Nemrut. At an altitude of over 2,000 meters, colossal severed stone heads stare into the harsh Anatolian winds. These disembodied faces of ancient gods litter the summit of Mount Nemrut, felled not by invading armies, but by centuries of tectonic violence that systematically decapitated the massive statues they once belonged to. Behind this scattered masonry rises a 50-meter-high cone of crushed limestone, an entirely artificial peak. King Antiochus I engineered this structure in the 1st century BC as an impenetrable tomb. The loose rock functions as a flawless, primitive security system. Any attempt to excavate the burial chamber causes the stones to instantly collapse inward, burying the intruders. Hauling tons of rock up a freezing peak required a brutal logistical undertaking driven by royal megalomania. Today, Mount Nemrut stands as a desolate high-altitude graveyard where an ancient bid for immortality was dismantled by the Earth's relentless geological machinery. Istanbul City. Istanbul, Turkey's largest and most iconic city, is an urban behemoth, severed directly down the middle by the churning waters of the Bosphorus Strait. One half of the city anchors itself in Europe, while the other, sprawling mass, extends into Asia. It stands not merely as a modern border, but as a physical collision zone of land masses and cultures, a reality that shapes every square meter of its layout. The architecture here operates as a massive open-air ledger of conquest. For over 1,000 years, this exact coordinate functioned as the impenetrable capital of the Byzantine Empire, only to be systematically absorbed and transformed into the absolute center of power for the Ottoman Empire. Because of this transfer of dominance, the city presents a radically rare architectural blend. Beneath the modern asphalt, the urban grid is heavily reinforced by Roman heritage and ancient Byzantine infrastructure, utilizing subterranean cisterns and massive defensive walls that outlasted the emperors who commissioned them. Above ground, these ancient European foundations intersect directly with sweeping Islamic architecture. Sky-piercing minarets and the vast lead-covered domes of Ottoman mosques dominate the skyline, casting shadows over the marble ruins of Roman hippodromes. Eastern and Western cultural philosophies do not just coexist here. They are physically baked into the same brickwork. Walking through the dense streets reveals a city built entirely on top of its own conquered ghosts. Istanbul refuses to preserve its heritage behind museum glass. Instead, it utilizes the remnants of fallen empires as the functioning foundation for its daily survival, standing as a permanent living monument to the relentless friction between two halves of the world. Hagia Sophia. A massive dome dominates the Istanbul skyline, holding the weight of colliding empires and conflicting religions beneath a single architectural canopy. Engineered in 537 AD during the height of the Byzantine Empire, Hagia Sophia operated as the largest cathedral on Earth for nearly a millennium. The sheer scale of the central structure defied the physical limits of antiquity. By distributing the immense load through a revolutionary system of pendentives, the architects created a suspended ceiling so expansive that contemporaries believed it could not have been built by human hands. This structural triumph survived tectonic violence and the brutal siege of 1453. When Constantinople fell to the Ottomans, the basilica was systematically converted into a grand mosque. Four towering minarets were anchored to its exterior perimeter, permanently altering the horizon. Yet the original interior was not erased. It was layered. The space now functions as a rare physical ledger where opposing epochs are locked together. Hagia Sophia forces an absolute architectural truce. Byzantine and Ottoman, Christian, and Islamic East and West all coexist within the exact same structural footprint. Sunlight pierces through a ring of windows at the base of the colossal dome, casting a stark, natural illumination across ancient, weathered marble slabs. The light simultaneously catches the gold leaf of centuries-old Christian mosaics and the sweeping, massive medallions of Islamic calligraphy suspended from the massive stone pillars. The building refuses to belong entirely to one era. It stands as an impregnable architectural survivor that absorbed the greatest powers of the ancient and medieval worlds, fusing their competing legacies into a singular, undeniable monument of human history. Sumela Monastery. Clinging to a sheer vertical rock face in the Pontic Mountains, a massive stone structure looms over the dense, mist-choked forests of the Black Sea region. Suspended hundreds of meters above a plunging valley, it resembles an impenetrable secret fortress, rather than a place of worship. This sanctuary defies gravity, anchoring itself aggressively into the treacherous wilderness. Carved into the cliffside in the 4th century by Greek Orthodox monks, the site operated for centuries as a formidable epicenter of pilgrimage. The extreme elevation acted as a natural defense, isolating the inhabitants in a high-altitude vault enveloped by perpetual heavy fog. Inside the architecture is a claustrophobic labyrinth of narrow stone corridors and ancient prayer cells chiseled directly into the raw bedrock. The damp, uneven walls are still coated with vibrant Byzantine frescoes, their pigments stubbornly enduring the brutal, moisture-heavy climate. The atmosphere thrives on a severe physical contrast, delicate, ancient, religious devotion, locked within a hostile, unforgiving landscape. When the thick mist swallows the cliffside and the wind howls through the deep gorge, the structure feels entirely severed from the modern era. A forgotten ancient bastion left behind by a vanished civilization brooding silently in the clouds. Aspendos Theatre. A colossal wall of ancient masonry rises from the southern plains of Turkey, near the modern city of Antalya. This is the Aspendos Theatre, an absolute anomaly of structural endurance. Engineered in the 2nd century during the reign of Marcus Aurelius, it stands today as one of the most immaculately preserved Roman theaters on the planet. While most ancient sites across the Mediterranean have succumbed to erosion and tectonic shifting, Aspendos retains a staggering level of technical perfection after nearly 2,000 years. The sheer scale of the limestone arena dictates its commanding presence. Designed to contain up to 15,000 spectators, semicircular tiers of heavy stone seating ascend aggressively toward the sky, locked against a monumental stage facade that has stubbornly refused to collapse. The Roman engineering prioritizes acoustic precision. The precise curvature and material density of the theater create an acoustic vacuum. A normal vocal frequency emitted from the center of the stage travels unobstructed, striking the highest tier of the stone gallery with absolute clarity. Unlike standard fragmented ruins, Aspendos maintains its imposing vaulted archways, subterranean stone corridors, and the crushing verticality of its original architectural footprint. When evening light cuts across the arena, casting high contrast, stark shadows over the weathered limestone, the historical weight of the structure becomes undeniable. The empty stadium operates as an atmospheric chamber where the spectacle of antiquity feels immediate. It requires no effort to envision the deafening roar of a massive audience, the sharp resonance of ancient theatrical performances, and the absolute, unquestioned authority of an empire that once dominated the known world. Aspendos does not present the past as a distant, abstract concept. It functions as a living acoustic vault where the echoes of a fallen superpower remain permanently trapped within the raw, unyielding stone. Mardin. Anchored onto a steep, jagged limestone escarpment in southeastern Turkey, a monochromatic labyrinth of stone stares out over the immense, flat expanse of the Mesopotamian plains, the geographic anvil where the earliest mechanisms of human civilization were forged. This is Mardin. The architecture operates as a masterclass in vertical density and environmental adaptation. The city does not merely sit on the mountain. It physically cascades down the sheer slope. Every structure, terraced houses, heavy vaulted archways, subterranean passages, and sharp angular stairways, is constructed from the exact same honey-colored masonry. This reliance on local bedrock creates a seamless, unified visual texture that dominates the landscape. When struck by low-angle sunlight, the deep, high-contrast shadows cast between the tightly packed buildings give the settlement the raw, unvarnished appearance of an impenetrable medieval stronghold. Historically, this extreme elevation was not chosen for aesthetics. It was a strict tactical necessity. For thousands of years, Mardin functioned as a heavily fortified chokehold, monitoring the relentless trade arteries that connected Anatolia, Mesopotamia, Persia, and the Levant. Because it served as a permanent bottleneck for merchant caravans and conquering armies, the urban grid absorbed a radically diverse population. Today it stands as a dense demographic anomaly where Arab, Kurdish, Turkish, and ancient Syriac Christian lineages are locked into close quarters coexistence. This relentless friction of cultures is baked directly into the infrastructure, from the heavy wooden doors of historic mosques to the hidden courtyards of active Orthodox monasteries. Mardin is a tactile, heavy stone ledger of human survival. It remains an amber-hued sentinel, permanently anchored above the plains, locking the fragmented history of the Middle East into a single cohesive fortress. Lake Van? Lake Van is the country's largest inland sea, yet it functions more like a closed-loop chemical cauldron than a traditional lake. Locked within a brutal volcanic landscape, the basin is saturated with highly saline and alkaline water, creating a dense fluidity that aggressively resists freezing even when severe winter temperatures plunge across the Anatolian plateau. The geography is a stark, high-contrast exhibition of geological violence. Jagged, completely arid mountain ranges and the scorched earth of dormant stratovolcanoes form a severe perimeter. They cast sharp black shadows across the hyper-reflective surface of the lake, creating a raw, photorealistic texture devoid of softening vegetation. The ambient acoustic environment is heavy and isolating. It is dominated not by the hum of wildlife, but by the low-frequency drone of wind sweeping over the high plateau and the heavy rhythmic crash of dense alkaline water against raw volcanic rock. Isolated deep within this caustic expanse sits Akdamar Island. Rising sharply from the chemical waves, it serves as a solitary stronghold of ancient human endurance. Here, the meticulously carved sandstone walls of a 10th century Armenian church weather the relentless elements. The structure stands as a stark, heavy monument to a fractured history, its intricate stone reliefs slowly enduring the abrasive, salt-heavy wind. The atmosphere at Lake Van is inherently oppressive, yet deeply hypnotic. It is a bleak, cinematic void, a landscape locked in uninterrupted, real-time exposure, functioning entirely on its own hostile terms. To stand on these barren shores is to observe a desolate frontier where tectonic history and chemical extremity have permanently exiled the modern world, leaving only a vast toxic mirror reflecting a harsh, unbroken sky. Lycian rock tombs Dalyan. Suspended hundreds of feet above the waterways of the southwestern Turkish coast, a series of colossal facades are violently carved into the sheer limestone cliffs. These are the Lycian rock tombs, engineered over 2 millennia ago by a civilization that weaponized extreme altitude. The architectural logic here was not driven by accessibility, but by a strict theological mandate: the dead must be stationed as close to the sky as possible to expedite the soul's extraction to the afterlife. To achieve this, the Lycians executed an impossible vertical construction, chiseling intricate Greek-style temple facades directly out of the raw, plunging bedrock. The result is a series of spectral structures that appear to hang suspended in the void. At the Kaunos site in Dalyan, these elevated stone vaults loom directly over a labyrinth of heavy river reeds and high-contrast jagged valleys. Further down the coast in Fethiye, the tomb of Amintas, known as the Tomb in the Garden, dominates the rock face with brutal, unchanging authority. They are not merely graves cut into the unyielding stone. These empty chambers stare blankly over the landscape, maintaining a permanent, high-altitude vigil over the living. Tlos ancient city. Anchored against the rugged, high-contrast hills of southwestern Turkey, Tlos operates as a massive architectural ledger of conquest. As one of the oldest and most strategically vital settlements of the enigmatic Lycian civilization, the city did not merely survive millennia of Anatolian warfare, it absorbed it. The site is a dense, vertical accumulation of empires, where the raw mechanics of human struggle and survival are permanently etched into the terrain. The steep topography forces a strict tactical layout, creating a jarring, layered aesthetic. At the absolute summit, dominating the high ground, sit the shattered heavy stone perimeters of an Ottoman and Byzantine fortress. This imposing defensive crown was engineered to exert absolute control over the sprawling valley below. Plunging immediately beneath these fortifications, the sheer sun-scorched cliff face is violently hollowed out. Here ancient Lycian rock tombs are chiseled directly into the unyielding bedrock, their dark, empty chambers, forming a grim vertical cemetery that watches over the lower ruins. Descending further down the slope reveals a sprawling cross-cultural grid, locked in a perpetual state of decay. A colossal Roman theater cuts deep into the earth, its weathered stone tiers locked against the hillside to harness acoustic perfection. Heavy raw foundations of forgotten temples and fractured stone-paved arteries weave through the uneven terrain, charting the daily grinding mechanics of a civilization that continually rebuilt itself. Over thousands of years, Tlos weathered the successive brutal occupations of the Lycians Greeks, Romans, Byzantines, and Ottomans. The settlement refuses to present a simple, sterilized snapshot of a single era. Instead, the ruins function as a brutal three-dimensional timeline where competing architectural philosophies and the sheer physical weight of shifting superpowers are compressed into a single calcified stronghold. Topkapi Palace. Positioned at the absolute edge of Istanbul's historic peninsula, Topkapi Palace commands a flawless tactical vantage point over the Bosphorus, the Sea of Marmara, and the Golden Horn. For nearly 4 centuries, this sprawling complex operated not merely as a royal residence, but as the ruthless beating heart of the Ottoman Empire, an impregnable command center controlling the massive trade arteries between Europe and Asia. Engineered in the 15th century, immediately following the conquest of Constantinople by Sultan Mehmed II, the palace rejects the monolithic single-block architecture favored by European monarchs. Instead, Topkapi was designed as a heavily compartmentalized fortress, functioning entirely as a self-sustaining city within a city. The sprawling layout dictates a strict hierarchy of access through a labyrinth of successive courtyards, heavy stone corridors, and heavily guarded ceremonial chambers. Deep within this fortified grid lies the harem, a strictly isolated, high-security sector, operating under its own complex secretive laws. The interior presents a jarring contrast between calculated authority and overwhelming Eastern luxury. Shadows cast by low-hanging Ottoman lanterns play across vaulted walls, densely clad in vibrant blue Iznik tiles and sweeping monumental Islamic calligraphy. These gilded chambers, overflowing with hoarded silver and gold, served as the exact locations where the fate of a massive multi-continental empire was continuously forged and reshaped. The atmosphere within Topkapi is distinctly heavy, defined by a crushing blend of absolute imperial power and deep-seated paranoia. The architecture itself feels inherently secretive, built to observe without being seen. Navigating these silent marble-paved corridors reveals a dense architectural vault where centuries of high-stakes diplomacy, ruthless political conspiracies, and world-altering decrees remain permanently locked into the unyielding stone. Bosphorus Strait. A relentless pulse of salt water churns between two continents, acting as the only natural barrier separating Europe from Asia. This is the Bosphorus Strait, a shimmering 30-kilometer artery that serves as the world's most strategic maritime chokehold. Unlike a static river, the currents here are notoriously treacherous, fueled by the collision of the cold Black Sea and the warmer, dense waters of the Mediterranean, a hydrographic phenomenon that has dictated the fate of empires for millennia. Strategically, the strait is a fortress of history. Byzantine walls and Ottoman fortresses still stand guard along its jagged cliffs, silent witnesses to centuries of naval warfare and merchant armadas seeking passage between the East and the West. When the evening fog rolls in, the silhouettes of these ancient stone bastions blend with the flickering lights of modern suspension bridges, creating a visual duality where 15th century defense meets 21st century engineering. Ferries cut across the wake, constantly carrying commuters between two vastly different realities on either shore. Navigation here is a dance with antiquity. To cross the Bosphorus is to drift through a physical divide that has remained the planet's most coveted maritime threshold, forever caught between the pull of two different worlds. Lake Mecca. A scorched volcanic void scars the arid Konya plain. Lake Mecca was once a geological anomaly, a massive water-filled caldera circling a secondary cinder cone. Today, it operates as a brutal exhibition of ecological collapse. The hydrology has entirely failed. The water has evaporated, leaving behind a violently cracked blood-red salt flat surrounding the blackened basaltic core. There is no biological movement here, only the relentless, high-contrast exposure of a fractured landscape. Mek no longer functions as a lake. It is a stagnant, silent graveyard. It stands as a desiccated monument, a raw geological casualty permanently dismantled by a merciless climate. Myra. A sheer vertical necropolis dominates the Lycian coastline. At Myra, the cliff face is violently hollowed out, packed with ancient honeycomb-like rock tombs that stare down with empty shadowed sockets. These heavy stone-carved facades were engineered to elevate the dead, turning the mountain itself into a high-altitude vault for a forgotten elite. Directly beneath this looming graveyard sits a colossal Greco-Roman theater. The architectural proximity is jarring a massive arena built for roaring crowds and visceral entertainment, locked in the permanent, silent shadow of the dead. The raw limestone tiers curve aggressively into the earth, enduring centuries of tectonic shock and encroaching river silt. There is no separation between the theater of the living and the fortress of the deceased. Myra operates as a stark, high-contrast collision of extreme public spectacle and the brutal, unyielding finality of stone permanently fusing life and death into a single calcified stronghold. Derinkuyu. But the grandeur lies not only in what you see on the surface, but in what remains hidden. Buried deep within the soft volcanic rock are massive multi-level underground cities, some reaching 18 stories deep, capable of sheltering 20,000 people. This is where entire communities once vanished to escape ancient invaders. How did they master such complex engineering without modern technology? The answer lies in the unique properties of the land itself. By carving into volcanic ash that is easily workable, yet hardens upon contact with air, ancient architects transformed entire mountain ranges into self-sufficient, impregnable fortresses. As you walk through these quiet, winding tunnels, you are not merely exploring ruins. You are witnessing a masterpiece of survival, where human ingenuity bent the very mountains to its will.